When I was 23, I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases and moved into a city where I knew exactly one person. 3 years later, when I look back in the mirror, I barely recognize myself. Not physically, but the person staring back at me had different dreams, different fears, and a completely different understanding of who she could be. Today, I want to talk about something we rarely discuss openly: how moving, whether across town or across the world, fundamentally rewrites who we are, and not just who we are, but who we become. Moving creates what psychologists call biological disruption. Your entire ecosystem, the coffee shop where you order, the routines, without thinking, the friends who finish your sentences vanish overnight. And here's what the fascinating part is: this rupture is terrifying and liberating in equal measure. When you move, you lose what researchers call your identity anchors, the external markers that remind you who you are. Your regular table at the library, your reputation at work, even the grocery store where the cashier asks you how your weekend is seem trivial, but they're actually profound. They're mirrors reflecting your identity back at you a dozen times each day. Removing those mirrors suddenly forces you to ask, who am I without them? One woman I interviewed described it perfectly. She said, in my old city, I was Sarah, the graphic designer who runs marathons and hosts dinner parties. In my new city, I'm just Sarah. I had to figure out what that meant. But here's where it gets interesting. That identity vacuum, that's also an opportunity. Social psychologists have found that major life transitions open up what they call windows of plasticity, periods where we're dramatically more open to change than usual. Moving is one of the biggest triggers of plasticity. Think about it. In your hometown, you might be the shy one because you're shy when you're 16 and everyone sees you that way. But moving somewhere new, and suddenly you can decide to be outgoing. You can reinvent yourself and your social persona entirely. No one knows the old you, and no one's going to say, wait, that's not like you. Research from Cornell University found that people who moved to new cities are more significantly likely to change their life habits, like quitting smoking, starting exercising, and even shifting their social political views, than people who stay put. The new environment doesn't just allow you to change, it invites it. You become the author of your own story without someone else's previous chapters telling you what to do. Moving also changes you through contrast. You don't really know what home is until you leave. I grew up thinking everyone lived the way I did, certain values, certain rhythms, certain unspoken rules. Then when I moved, suddenly I was surrounded by people with completely different views, assumptions about how life should work, different ideas about family, time, success, even something as simple as a good conversation. This is what anthropologists call making the familiar strange. When you're immersed in a new culture, even if just a different region or some country, you start seeing your background as an option among many rather than just the way things are. A friend of mine who moved from a small southern town to New York said, I didn't realize that moving slowly and chatting with strangers was a choice until I lived somewhere where everyone rushed and avoided eye contact. Then I had to decide, is this slowness who I am, or is it just where I'm from? That questioning, that growth, you're forced to separate yourself from your environment to figure out what is essentially your views versus the views of where you live. Here's the humbling truth about moving. It makes you incompetent again. You don't know about the Cobra cow, you don't know the aisle where your cilantro is, you don't understand the local humor or references. If you move to a different country, maybe you're stumbling to learn a new language and you feel like a child again. This is disorienting if you're normally successful and confident in your old life. Suddenly you're confused and making mistakes. But here's the profound part: this incompetence is a gift. Being a beginner again, truly a beginner, builds a type of humility and resilience that's hard to develop otherwise. You remember what it feels like not to know, to be vulnerable, to ask for help. This changes how you relate with others who are struggling. It changes how you approach new things. Research on expatriates show that people who moved internationally develop higher levels of what's called cognitive flexibility, the ability to see multiple perspectives and adapt to new situations. Why? Because they had to do it. They lived through the discomfort of not knowing and came out the other side. You become someone who's comfortable with uncertainty, someone who knows they can figure it out. That confidence, earned through confusion, becomes a part of your identity. Perhaps most significantly, moving changes you through relationships. When you move, you don't just change locations, you change your social networks. The friends you make in a new place are different than the ones you left behind. And those new relationships shape you in new directions. Your values, habits, even your vocabulary shifts towards those of your social circle. But it's not just about new relationships, it's also about the absence of old ones. Without your childhood friends around, you might discover your interests are different without being mocked. Without your family nearby, you might develop routines that differ from how you were raised. The people that knew you before aren't there to anchor or define you. You get to define who you want to be on your own terms. Moving isn't just about geography, it's about identity. It's about quiet courage in the decision to meet yourself in a new context. So, if you're considering a move, especially to Charleston, South Carolina, know this: the journey isn't only about finding a new home, it's about rediscovering you. Charleston has a special kind of magic. It's soulful, walkable, full of creativity and community. It's a kind of place that holds space for you in your next chapter. If you've been dreaming about relocating here, I love to help you make that transition. I specialize in helping women and families move to Charleston and design a life that fits who you are and who you're becoming. If this resonated, come join me on my Substack community. I write weekly about home, lifestyle, and designing a life that feels like you. The link is below. Because moving just doesn't change where you live, it transforms who you are.